All right, we're gonna get started. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Vibrant response. Do we have a motion for the approval of minutes from November 8th?
So moved.
Co-second.
All right, Lori. Any discussion or notes or corrections for the minutes? Do you want to read the minutes? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes from November 8th, please indicate so. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes are passed. I did find out after sending out the agenda that President Schutt could not be with us today because she's traveling, so we go directly to her as well.
And I saw the agenda today, and it looks like it's very full. So I'm going to keep my comments very short. I feel like I have a lot to report, but there are all sorts of things that are kind of in process or, kind of wrapping up or starting out. So I have a lot going on. I did just want to touch base briefly on the President's State of the University speech last Thursday, right? I wanted to, if you haven't seen it, I think there's some conversation about whether or not we can get it into video and out there, but it was streamed live and lots of people watched it that way. We had a good turnout. She went through a lot of material and a lot of charts and graphs, and so I'm sure that any of those could be made available to any group or individual who wants to see more of that. But I just want to say that I was very encouraged by the remarks that she made about the future. I want to say that as someone who works with her very closely, there's not a day or an hour or a minute that she's not thinking about sustainability for this institution and encouraging her leadership team to do the same. So if you're ever wondering what we're doing, we're reading demographic trend studies. We're looking at all of the things that will inform our understanding of what we need to do to keep our doors open and not just be surviving but thriving. That's really the goal. So I was encouraged by some of the things that she talked about. Obviously, it's challenging and it will remain so. I think that's one huge takeaway should be we're not going back to something at any point in time where things were less worrisome or challenging. So I think if we can all agree on that, we can jump into the future and kind of get on the same page, and I know you all are. I really appreciated all the folks that were in the room. Thank you for being here. So that's all I have to say. Many things going on and more to come, but she touched on the really important things, I think.
So I've had a couple of questions after the address, particularly around is it the task force sustainability task? What's
The President's task force on financial sustainability.
Yes, that one. And on the meetings that are coming up with divisions, and a couple of different people have asked me, does this mean we're going? And I wasn't here when this happened, but is this going to be a repeat of not retrenchment but of prioritization?
No. We did prioritization. There's a full-on process for that. We followed the process, kind of to the letter. We got the information that we needed. It did inform some decisions during the retrenchment decision-making period, but we're not doing program prioritization. That is not what this is about. But I will say that she did talk about that at this last meeting here, right? And she did talk about the process being all-inclusive and a part of the shared governance piece, so that faculty are at the table looking at programs as administrators will be and other staff members will be. But that's just part of the conversation. The charge of that group will be more than just looking at academic programs, and that won't even be really part of the charge. It's part of the process to get to an outcome that she is hoping to get to. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Hello, Senators. The Advisory Council met last week, and all the faculty on the Advisory Council were there. Linda was out of town, but Sue was with us, as was a student who, Sarah, yeah, Sarah was with us too. So let's see here, what did we talk about? Anything that got onto the agenda today, I'm not going to go into as much detail, but that's our main order of business always anyway, is okay with managing the agenda. But things that we didn't get onto the agenda, I don't think, or at least I want to amplify. One is, Andrew pointed out that, and maybe he was told this, but in any event, we need to update our Senate committees on the web. So I think we intend to get that done. Another issue, which I think we've kind of deferred, but if Sue wants to comment, she may, but through various channels, Neil and Sue have been asked a little bit about our admissions process, and we're going to get a report on that later, I
Yeah,
think.
he's been in American Samoa for a week and a half.
So at some point, I expect at least the Advisory Council, and then no doubt onto the Senate, will want to just get a report on that. And I'm thinking of things like, what's our GPA admission rate, and what are our current admission processes for, I don't know all the right adjectives, but special, conditional admits and things like that. We discussed quite a bit about the Faculty Development Committee and the bylaws, and spoke to that in the announcement of the agenda. And really, there was an announcement, I don't know if we should just make this now. I guess Michael Parker's on sabbatical, and Oliveri has.
That's next term.
Yeah.
But it's his next term.
Yeah.
But she's here early. So anyway, that's a 1 or a 2 term substitution.
I don't care.
At least
but
one,
I think
okay.
it's one.
And
I thought it was just one.
I believe that's all I had in way of notes or comments from me.
I have no recollection of the meetings, that sounds good.
We did that? We got a lot done.
Yeah, I guess that one other thing that came up is we did discuss a little bit about certain committees and whether or not those needed to be, whether language needed to be changed in those bylaws to make each committee more representative. But then we remembered that the Committee on Committees charge says that part of their role is to make committees as representative as possible anyway. So we just sort of wanted to remind the Committee on Committees as we do try to fill slots that open up, we want to avoid situations where, a bunch of people from the same division all fill one committee. So that was, I think, the only other thing.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, thank you. Brittany.
So I'll just start by saying I have to head out after this for Race Awareness Week events. But I'm going to explain a little bit. I only have one announcement, but I'm going to explain it a little bit because it's, in my opinion, a little complex. So we're voting on the student fee amount tomorrow night, which, as you know, we switched our process. So we vote on the fee at the beginning of the year, and then we do the allocation the remainder of the year. So right now we have 3 options in front of the members of the committee on what the student fee will be. All of the options in front of the senators are increases because when obviously the enrollment is down, as we also transition to more graduate students or more online students, that means people are not paying our student fee. So our student fee has been taking a dramatic hit the past couple years that we are basically, every budget is kind of on that skin and bones operation of you're either paying for a salary of a staff member or you're paying for the salary of the students or the hourly pay of students and whatever you can do for events. And now it's getting to the point where, okay, we can't provide food for that event or maybe this event can't happen. So I'm just calling attention to this because I don't know if the faculty understands that the student fee really is getting to the point of this year when we're having to propose increases. Right now, I think we have one of the highest student fees across the state, and there's a proposal of, the highest proposal being brought is nearly a $400 student fee. And that would be so that students don't have to cut as many programs. because the lowest option is only gonna be about a $17 increase, so it'll be about $360 they pay, but they'll have to cut $200,000 from our student fee programs. And that means programs are gonna be cut. That means staff will be cut from a lot of our organizations, or events just won't happen, which also will probably affect retention because students don't just come to college for that. They come for some of the experiences or things that take their mind off of the stress of college. And so I think it's gonna really have to be a conversation for the university of, do we just let these programs drop, or how do we pick up the funds elsewhere? And this is where personally I am going up to the HEC on Friday because I'm on that HEC task force and I'm very passionate about the state funding we receive. And I think that SOU is just in a point where we have to look at this, but I think it should be alarming to you that we will have a $400 fee potentially proposed to students when they just had a 10% increase. And they had a 4%. And now it's on the table for our students to look at every single budget they have to fund from students and go, I guess we just don't need this anymore. Or I guess we just won't fund these events for the Multicultural Fair Resource Center that help our students of color when we do not have many students of color here and that's a resource that they have. I think it's very alarming, and I think it's something that you should all know is on the table. And if you're interested, it is going to be in the gallery at about, I think it's around 7 p.m. tomorrow. It's going to be a really tough conversation, and I think all students are going to come in there on one end of either I don't want to raise the fee at all because students cannot pay the fee, but also how do we just cut $200,000 from programs? That's a lot. And you can't really say, oh, I'm going to cut Marvin from the MRC, because a lot of our budgets we're paying our actual salary for staff, or like the lights in this building. So these are tough decisions that students are having to make with our student fee, and tomorrow night is when we're making a really big decision, and I just thought you should all know that this is something on the table, and it's probably going to be upsetting to students either way it goes. They're going to be upset that we increase the fee, or they're going to be upset when they hear that their clubs are cut, or our events are cut, or confused why we can't serve pizza anymore at an event. It's just confusing, and for students who aren't on the inside of our operations, they don't understand why. So I know that's a really depressing announcement, but I think you should understand it because I personally don't think other people know our process much or know the decisions we have to make, because in my opinion, our student fee process is going to be in the hole a lot quicker than some other things because we are getting a lot more online students or graduate students who just don't pay our fee. And I think we're going to have to start looking at options soon because we're really operating on a very slim budget at the moment. That's about it.
Can I just add something really quick?
Oh yeah, any questions?
I just, thank you, that was really
Yeah.
well said. I don't know if people do realize that staff positions, not student positions, but staff positions are also funded by student fees, not by the general fund. So when undergraduate enrollments are down, that's the hurt that you're describing. So thank you for making that very clear.
Either Sue or Brittany, how many staff positions are funded through the student fee?
Student life positions are funded,
All student life positions?
all of them are funded through student fees. And then, I do want to say that Deborah Laverne and Josh, who works in the budget office, are helping at ASSOU with their budgeting. When they go to the meetings, they work with them closely. So they're getting a lot of good expertise on the budgeting side. They're not just sort of left to their own, like, who's a math major? But enrollment is enrollment. So if the fees aren't there, then it's like you don't have many places to turn.
Yeah, I will say we are using, obviously we use projections. We are using a little bit lower than the school's projections because if it's like past years where the projections are off, we just get hit really hard. Where this year we had to send a notice to all of our student fee recipients and say, you have to cut 5 to 10% of what we told you were getting. And for students, again, they don't, from me on the student government side, most people know I'm president, but some don't. So when they'll talk, they'll be like, I can't believe they want me to cut 10%. They gave me this money. They don't get that I can't tell them, sorry, I thought I'd have this many students, but they just didn't show up this year. And I'm trying to explain to them that I know I told you this, but the money's not there. and that's why we're also paying off a deficit. So we're really in this process of trying to tell students, and so we're using these projections that we have, but in the past we typically do fall short, and then we're left telling our programs, I'm sorry, the money's not there, you just can't spend it. And that really does leave, like I said, we're paying for those salaries and like staff positions for like MRC myself. That leaves only one area to really cut is events. So we're just an operating staff, but I would say we can't hold those resources like we'd like to.
Online students don't pay any, I guess I'm confused, any student fees?
They-
Do they receive zero service?
Undergraduate online students, I have to check, I don't know. If they're, it's hard to know whether they're actually off campus entirely or on campus, so they typically don't pay a building fee and a health fee, and there are a couple of others I don't know about.
So, but one of those students with the online attribute shows up at the health center, we send them away?
No, Mark, I don't think we send them away. I just don't think the structure is just different. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into it and get back to you. I haven't really looked at that for a long time.
And if they're like a majority online, but it's the second they hit one on-campus class,
Right.
they pay the fees.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
There's a cut point.
and from my conversations with Anna, I don't think they like to turn anybody away ever, and they find a way to do it, because we find fees around that can help. Like, we have work study, but not every student uses work study. So they have loopholes that if someone maybe didn't pay the health and wellness center fee, we're gonna try and help them out.
Right.
But it's just a simple fact of if they don't take those online classes, we're not getting that fee. And also, like, take into consideration some of the numbers you're receiving for enrollment is also that dual enrollment of high school students. They are also not paying a fee. So a lot of those numbers you're getting are not people that, simply put, I'm not getting that funding for. So our funding is much lower each time. And it gets really hard when we're a bigger university and now we're somewhat on a decrease of people who are coming to higher education at this point. Then we're now having to cut a lot of our programs that were in place. And it's 100% there are going to be programs cut this year. Last year we tried our best to find things that Danielle was like, I don't need to fund the SU this year, we can cut there. This year, there's nothing someone has to get cut. People have to get cut. There's no way around it for the student fee this year. So it's going to be an unfortunate event.
If we could squeeze them for $20 or something.
Yeah, I swear it down. I'll make that recommendation on your behalf. Dr. Sider said.
Sue, I don't know if this is a question you can even answer. Is there any data available on how enrollment for next term is looking compared to this term? The reason I ask is I noticed, for instance, that this year, even though at Digital Center we're seeing this increased enrollment for fall, I also have a record number of students who have not registered for winter, and most of those have significant balance holds on their account. So I'm worrying.
That's the main reason why.
Yeah.
And they should obviously get into the registrar's office and have conversations about that. Because in some cases, it could just be one payment and it gets down below the threshold, and they're good to go. But it will, the holds will keep them from registering. To your first question, so Chris sets out his report, you're on that list, I believe, and you can see sort of what we're looking at for winter and for winter term. But it is a retention issue, and so you can work with Matt to get the list of students who have significant balance goals and try to help facilitate that. There's two arguments. One argument is we don't want to be irresponsible about a significant balance and burden the student by letting them go over the threshold. That's not fiscally responsible for the student, and we don't want to encourage that. But at the same time, if it's just a few $100s and they can, get below the balance, then they're good to go. They can get green light to register. I just did something with a student around that a few weeks ago.
I would just say there's a point too that you also pay this fee every term. I don't know if you want to do that. So this is $400 potentially every term. I did just email Andrew the PDF of the options that people will be voting on tomorrow night. And granted, there is definitely room for someone to say no increase at all and I don't want any of these options, but like Sue said, we do have Deborah and Josh there that are giving us these expertise, so we trust the options put in front of us. It's just now making the tough decision, but I do have the PDF sent to Andrew if anyone is interested in kind of looking at the funding of what we need compared to the increase and how much would need to be cut otherwise funded, but there's no other funding source for us really.
I've
So
added it to the drive, so it's not.
I would encourage all of you to try to reach out to students and, you know, the holds are better than they used to be, but the significant balance hold is one that we don't have a lot of flexibility with. So, but if you've got students who aren't registered right now for winter term, they need to get on it.
And just for clarification, so it's the registrar's office they need to go talk to?
You can get the list of students from the registrar's office. Matt works with each division to supply student contact information and if it's, and what kind of hold it is.
And then, so let's say that student's in a class you're teaching, then you tell that student you need to go talk to.
I would start with the registrar's office. Eventually, it's probably gonna be the bursar or, you know, business services, maybe work out a payment plan. I mean, there are lots of different options, but if they don't see a pathway, and that comes from you all in many cases because you are the people with whom they have the closest relationships in many ways.
Right?
It may not be that we all need to go to the registrar's office individually.
No, I think if you email Matt, he can also give
Well,
you
so
some names.
Leah Grice, the social science student success coordinator, she's done this for social sciences. I assume the other SSCs have done it.
Probably
But
for us.
they themselves contacted Matt and got a list of students with holds and then sent it out to the faculty.
Whatever
So
works
social
for-
sciences works pretty,
Yep.
it's worked pretty well. I assume the other divisions were doing it, but if not, I think that's a place, I think they all have, so.
They
I would go
do,
to
they
the
reach out to
SSCs.
Matt and they work closely to get the list.
Yeah.
I didn't literally mean you walk over, but through your SSC, thank
I'll
you.
do whatever you say.
Yeah, I would add that the list is actually run by Chris Stanek, and it goes out about week 4 or 5 to all the SSCs, and they're able to see any type of hold that they're anticipating, including the significant balance, and they get on those right away to help students get cleared so that they can enroll. And so right now, that squeeze point are typically the significant balance. They often work with financial aid as well as Matt to see, can we open it and put the hold back on? But the SSCs are a great group of people if you're concerned or worried about some of your students that are on your advising list to help you through some of this turmoil, because they've got this pretty nailed.
Any other questions about this?
I'll just say, I'll put a plug in for faculty contact too.
Thank you, Brittany. All right, next up we have Brett Anderson on both the Carpenter 2. Did you also have some other things to talk about?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick update,
Okay.
just a brief update on the scholarship award. So first is the Carpenter 2 awards are in front of you for approval. That's pretty straightforward. I'll answer any questions you have about that. That's my ability. We had 24 applications this time around. We were able to fund 19 out of the 24. It's about 50% of the total ask. Usually that's, if we can fund 75%, we feel like we're making most everybody happy. 50% is not too painful. When it's less than that, it gets a little bit stressful. So that was kind of at that threshold. We had $8,500 to give for this round of Carpenter 2. I just peaked at 2018, 2017, and that was last year. We had in the fall round was 12,000, and the year before was 11. This one was 8,500, but that's above my pay grade on how that number comes about. So don't ask me, but I can point you to the right office. So that's it for the Carpenter 2. Quick update on the Distinguished Scholarship Award that the committee is working on. We met this morning and we have kind of our first pass at a draft of that, and we're kind of workshopping that as a committee this morning. Our goal is to still have that in front of you 2 weeks from today. We didn't expect to have it ready today, but hopefully in 2 weeks you'll have at least what we consider to be an initial proposal of the scholarship award, and then we'll see at that point if we have kind of, if if we feel like we've taken as far as we can, we need to pass it to Senate to make some decisions type of thing. But what we're confirming is that doing the scholarship award is then bringing up some housekeeping for the distinguished service and distinguished teaching award processes. And so we're kind of probably going to give you our proposal for the service award alongside some recommended changes for the service, the service and the teaching award. So put that on your radar, hopefully for 2 weeks from now.
And Brett, is there any sense among the committee that you would try to implement the research award this year, or would that go into effect next year?
We're hoping that we can award it this year. We'll see. I mean, our goal is to get it in front of you in 2 weeks, and then we'll see what happens. It'll be behind, right? The normal timing, as you know, right, is already, that train has already left the station. So that's our hope, that we can still make it happen for the spring, just kind of on a little bit of an expedited path for this first year. But that's the goal.
Any questions for Brett?
Thank you for working so expeditiously on the scholarship award. So much appreciated.
Are we gonna have 2 awards for that, up to 2?
TBD.
Okay, because I know there was discussion that it's called scholarship and creative activity, so I just want to make sure that, you know.
I can tell you that there has not been a discussion, and I hadn't seen one coming about just having a scholarship and creative, just not parsing it like that.
Okay.
The Distinguished Service Award, that one awards up to 2. Distinguished Teacher Award awards up to 4. So in that sense, if we're using those as kind of our models, if I had to guess, our proposal will probably say it can be up to 2 per year can be awarded, but not any.
1 scholarship, 1 creative, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the committee. I don't think we want to get into defining those terms, to be honest.
A few people have come up to me and noted that with the teaching award, and even though I've been receiving the nominations, I haven't looked at what those look like for this year, but I think for the past, since it's been offered, that possibly no professional track people have won it, and yet it's the award that's most likely to be applicable to professional track. And since it is one that has 4 awardees, some have asked if potentially that could be divided between, at least 2 for professional track, 2 professorial. But I also don't know how many have been nominated or have chosen to decline the nomination, which goes to my other suggestion, is that I've having just received all the nominations and also had to pass on several people declining to be nominated because the process is so burdensome on the awardees. And so if there's anything we can do to make the process a little.
Yeah, so thank you. In 2 weeks' time, like I said, that's the goal, is to give you a proposal. It may be that we get to the point where we've kind of opened up so many of these tangencies that maybe instead of we propose the scholarship award in 2 weeks, that we come to you saying, all right, here's the 4 issues that we feel like we've taken as far as we can as a small committee. It needs a wider discussion. So all those things are on our radar. The new one to my ear is your comment about the professorial versus the professional track. As having been on the committee side of it, I haven't seen any of that tension. I don't want to comment on how many nominations there were versus how many were awarded. But I don't think there has been much of even the potential for one particular group getting left aside or not.
Brett, in your experience, is it common to award 4 in a year?
Well, the Distinguished Teaching Award has not been around all that long. This may be the 4th
I think it's the 4th year.
year for it.
And we've had years that 4 were not?
Last year there was 2 awarded.
I remember last year.
Last year was 2 awarded. The year before that there were 4 awarded. I don't know about years prior, to be honest. One issue that's come up is that once you've got it once, you're done. Some dialogue I've heard is that there may be some appetite for maybe every 10 years, right? So you just can't have to have one at the Singing Teaching Award in the last 10 years to be eligible again, right? So you could win it, say, once a decade, and that seems like a reasonable thing to do. So that may be one of those types of things as we craft the scholarship award. We'll be presenting. It seems a little weird to have the scholarship award every 10 years if the other 2 are just get it once and done. And so that's kind of those are the kind of revisions that kind of go hand in hand for all 3. So there's some housekeeping. That's one of them that we talked about this morning quite a bit. And the committee, hard for me to speak for the entire committee, but there has been some moments where it felt like, oh, well, we're just going to unilaterally make this decision for everyone. It seems like some wider dialogue is important on some of those things, and that being one of them. So again, the goal is to bring you something on in 2 weeks. It's not real clear to me whether it's going to be here's our final proposal or if it's going to be more here's our proposal. Do you want us to refine anything? Let's talk this through. So we might carve out a little time on the agenda for it.
Any other questions about that?
Is there anywhere you can see past winners, like online? I
Oh,
mean, there's like, I know there's like a plaque.
Teaching awards and that, or are we talking about Carpenters?
No, the teaching and service awards in the past.
You mean the applications or just?
No, past winners.
Who won?
Just past winners.
Is there a list kept anywhere?
There's a plaque, I think,
In the Churchill hallway.
That's the
Is
only
it-
thing.
It's
There's
not
a
on
picture of it, and it's mentioned program.
Okay.
You can make a note that I will talk to Sarah about maybe we can put a place on the Senate website.
Great.
All right, so going back to the Carpenter 2 grant recommendations, as has been our custom, awardees like to know when they have their money so they can make plans about how to spend that money. So I would entertain a motion to waive the 2-week rule if one would like to make that. All right, Kimball.
Second.
Brian seconds. All right, any discussion on the waiving of the 2-week rule for consideration of the Carpenter 2 grants? All those in favor, please indicate so by raising your hand. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. All right, would we like to see a motion on the approval of the Carpenter 2 grant recommendations?
I move we approve.
All right, Kimball moves to approve. Reminder, if you are one of the recommended recipients, you should probably abstain. Anyone want to second? I'll second. Michael. Any discussion? Can we strike Brian Fedoruk off this?
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
All right, all those in favor of the Carpenter 2 grant recommendations for fall 2019, indicate so by raising your hand. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, the recommendation passes. Congratulations. All right, well, thank you, Brett. Let us know when you have more, and let me draft so you want us to share. All right, next up we have the Graduate Council report, and I'm not sure who is speaking on behalf of Graduate Council.
Well, I speak on behalf of Graduate Council, and I think Sherry is probably here to speak on behalf of Computer Science. Good. Okay. Well, then on behalf of Graduate Council, we approved a series of curricular decisions submitted to us by Computer Science. They were primarily what are often known in curriculum parlance as housekeeping, and I think that Sherry would be probably delighted to talk about the specifics.
So the vast majority were the fact that I discovered last year that a number of the 500 courses had gotten out of sync with the approved changes to 400 courses, particularly in terms of prerequisites. And that was problematic. And so you'll notice that there's a long list of things that just say, bring these prerequisites in line with this 400 level course. The other thing that is more substantive is that we did remove the 3 graduate courses that were part of the PSM program that has now been fully taught out and no longer needed to be in the catalog.
What's PSM?
Professional Science Masters, so those are much more, they're put out as a master's program for scientists who are interested in being the bridge between an expert science group and the upper management. So they tend to be a management-focused position that is geared for people to, say, communicate between a group of engineers who are working on specific details and the head of their business area so that they can better understand each other. Better known as some of the tricky middle management life that some of us lead.
Just curious, how long did that program run? It seemed like it was introduced recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, both the PSM and math and CS were introduced recently, had a fairly short run because students really expected support and we really needed them to be tuition paying. The CS program actually had a longer history because it evolved as a change from the old School of Math Science. So I don't know if any of you were around when we actually had a School of Math Computer Science. But we had an old school area degree that was math computer science, and it had been birthed out of that in the dark ages, and then it lasted past the dissolvement of actually that degree type. So the PSM was a reworking of that into a more modern setting. But it was just very difficult to draw enough students in science areas who don't expect to be getting near full ride graduate assistantships, which we really can't afford at our institution. So they both were good programs, both in math and CS. I mourn them greatly, that's why I keep talking.
Any other questions for Sherry? All right, well, I guess we'll listen to it. Thank you. All right, so that brings us to our undergraduate curriculum committee report, which is a little bit more substantive. We have a number of proposals in here, including a new major, a new minor, and a new certificate. So who is the, okay, you're chair of
I'm the
this.
chair of curricular committee, and so, over this term, we've been meeting and we have proposed the new major of gender, sexuality, and women's studies. There's also a minor that comes along with that, as well as a bunch of new courses throughout the different departments that, have been updated, and then in addition to that, some housekeeping stuff. We're really trying to wrap up all the majors and minors language this year so that people can't double dip. So if you have questions about that, I have my notes. I can also go back into deeper notes and then get you answers in the long term as well.
I see Kylan.
We also have the people who have the deeper notes available.
And do we have anyone for that minor in health promotion?
Yeah.
All right, well, Carol, do you want to say a few words about the major? I mean, it's obviously a pretty big proposal. And
So for those of you who don't know, so gender, sexuality, and women's studies began as women's studies in the 80s. And at that time, not that I was here, but faculty, there was no direct appointment faculty. It was faculty from across the university coming together. They created a council, and we have our own separate bylaws, and that has been maintained throughout the transition. So in 2010, we became gender, sexuality, and women's studies. And then since that time, there's always been talk of a major. Our program, up until last year, only had 0.5 faculty, now we're up to 1.5. But we rely heavily on courses in other disciplines, which is why we feel like we can do a major. If it was only 1.5 with just DSWS, I did over but because of the extensive coursework and involvement of faculty. So there is sort of a joke that once you're on the council, you're on it for life. And we do have people who, until they retire, are on it. But our faculty are much more involved in assessment, and we have our own curriculum committee that decides on whether courses actually fit our guidelines and objectives, but whether they can be counted. And then in addition to that, there's the Trans Studies Certificate, which we will, I guess, put forward to be a standalone, I'm not sure that's the correct language, a standalone certificate. Both Carrie, who's here, and myself published in Transgender Studies, which is one of the reasons why we thought we could offer that particular certificate. Let's see, I'm just sort of giving a heads up on what we're doing. And then the minor is just cleanup, obviously. Is that?
Did I hear that the certificate itself is very unique in the
Yes.
state of Oregon?
Yeah, so the certificate itself, so as far as we know, nobody in the nation has a transgender studies certificate.
That is solely
That's solely trans studies, yeah. And what we're excited about is Brooke Colley and NAS is gonna be offering a class, and then Omarosa and Diana are gonna both, and they'll switch, offer a class in English, which again, I think makes it really unique because we're not seeing some of that. And we hope to add additional courses as we proceed, and hopefully we'll hear from other folks too, in other programs if they have anything like that. So I think it'll be a real draw, well, we hope it'll be a real draw to students, and because we have a high Pride Index rating, I think that will sort of also boost our support.
Questions for folks?
I was looking through some of the things, and I noticed that in one of the proposals, and I can't quote which one, there was a table that listed the total cost for an undergraduate to go through and have this particular major for different schools, but it didn't have a comparison to SOU, so I was wondering why that was.
So it wasn't for this particular major, it was just in general, the general cost, so not necessarily GSM specific. I followed the model of another example that didn't have SOU in it, so that's really the reason why it wasn't in there. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you were gonna mention like scholarships or something.
That didn't include that, it was strictly just sort of the cost. I think it was the WUI versus ethics for typical student. Yeah. And a typical 4-year student.
Would the majors, would it be housed in social sciences or?
Right now GSWS is housed in humanities and culture, so that's where it would.
All right, what about the minor in health promotion? You want to say a few words about that?
Sure. I speak better when it's question driven, but we'll front load you. So my name's Jamie Wiener, and I'm from the Health and PE department. I've been the chair over there now. I think I'm in my 5th year. And we've actually been wanting to bring up a minor for quite some time. And I think it was just a matter of coordinating and getting the work done. And so we've done it. And in writing the proposal, I was interested to find that we're the only public in Oregon that doesn't offer some kind of minor in health. They all have slightly different names. The composition of our minor includes a core, which is I think 11 lower division credits and 3 upper division credits with a comprehensive overview of health, a lot of breadth from Health 1 and 2. The American Heart Association CPR First Aid certification is one that we've adopted recently over Red Cross because more of the healthcare industry wants that particular certification. So that serves the students really well right off the bat. And then nutrition is part of the core. And from there they can choose, so that's 14 credits. From there they can choose 12 additional upper division credits from pretty much our entire curriculum. So they can basically sculpt their area of focus further. If they want to do community health promotion, we have select courses in that. If they want to go more exercise science and human performance, we have several courses in that. And if they're wanting to look at more sport injury treatment prevention, we have coursework in that. So it gives them a little bit of opportunity to delve down into those areas. So it's a 26 credit minor, and we feel that it would complement a variety of degrees on campus.
Any questions about the minor?
This is a general question, not a question for Jamie or even the other folks. I was wondering, isn't it our custom, just to remind everybody, and remind me, we vote on minors and majors, but not other curriculum changes? Is that right? Oh, a new major, I mean, a new minor.
New majors.
And, but the rest of it, we pretty much just, we get the report from the curriculum committee.
We still vote on the course changes.
Course changes.
Yeah. I mean, it's always, generally speaking, it's like a big package of, here's all the courses, and we just vote to approve the entire package. We don't generally like vote course by course.
Good Lord.
But yeah, the major would be approved separately from that, yeah.
Okay. So it's an omnibus course change.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a question about minors. What proportion of our students graduate with a minor?
I don't know.
There's only a couple of departments that even require one.
Business, I think, is the.
And I think something in English does too.
I'll check. The thing about minors is they don't typically declare until they're,
Till they graduate.
right, but they do have,
We can put it in banner if we want.
we can find out.
But we could look retrospective at what proportion
Yeah,
actually have.
definitely can do that.
Any other questions?
Actually, I had one about the major. I was curious, I was looking at your numbers, your projected numbers. How did you think about, in terms of like how many new students would come to campus for this major versus how many existing minors might be, oh, great, I can finally get a major in this, might switch? How do you think about that calculus?
So we expect a handful of majors to minors, so I think the minors to switch over. I think we projected a little bit low in terms of drawing people just because in thinking about trying to advertise this academic year to start in the fall, it's going to be tough. But I've been talking a little bit with Vince Smith about using, I can't remember what, something Google to advertise because he's had success with ES and sociology. And so I think given again our sort of Pride Index rating, I think we will actually draw students here. So it's hard to sort of guess on numbers. And so I think we were sort of lowballing some of the numbers, but I think we should have success because we have gotten emails from potential students, sometimes as transfers, sometimes as new students, asking, do you offer a major? And when I have to say no, and even though I try to talk about the IIS major, usually they decide to go elsewhere. And I'd say I get at least a couple of those a year, those direct emails. So even though it's pretty clear on our site that we don't offer majors.
And until it's finally approved, you'll say, we have one pending.
Yes. So I have been using that like.
We have, but
yeah.
we're like, pending approval.
I think
we're working on that right now.
I got very good at that sentence.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's interesting is before I even submitted the paperwork, I got another one of those emails, and I emailed Jody to say, can I even mention that this is like on its way through? Because, so I think students are really interested in it, and part of it has to do with us being able to lower costs, so.
Can you talk more about the Pride Index?
Oh, sure.
It's the Campus Pride Index, so it's the biggest sort of thing out there that measures LGBTQ climate on different campus universities. And so for a number of years, and I don't know if it's been what this most current year was looking like, but we're on the top 25 for at least 5 years in a row. So we do actually get a lot of students who come here because of that, because when they're looking for colleges, they're looking for a queer and trans-friendly place. And that index includes, it's a very long sort of questionnaire, it includes a lot of things, but it does reference academic programs in the area as well, and so that is part of what makes a strong campus is having academic programs, not just what the housing policies are or all of that stuff, that matters too. But.
thank you very much, and see you in 2 weeks from now.
Right.
We're a whole 20 minutes ahead of schedule.
I had to email Joan until we get
Glad you got it. All right, well, as you all know, last year we approved a FCAR task force, and part of that charge was to have that task force come to Senate by the end of this term.
I also want to just, right to Campbell say, we beat you. And Dennis.
So the task force is here to report to us, and the report is in the drive, so hopefully folks had a chance to kind of peruse that a bit. So Joan, share the task force?
So, it was Brian.
You want me to come over there?
Anna and I just gave you a hard copy of it, in case you had to look at it. So over the summer, we interviewed directors, and then from that interview, we created a survey and surveyed faculty. And I think a couple major things came out of that is, number one, the FBAR has no teeth. Nothing happens if you do a poor job of it or you don't do it at all. And there's inconsistency across campus in how the FBARs are treated. Who gives feedback, how much feedback, what's done with it, is it shared? And the bylaws are kind of vague on what should be done with it. But one of the most interesting things I saw in the faculty survey is that the new faculty think that the FBAR is important and they find great value in it. After they've been here 5 years, everything goes downhill. So we made some recommendations, and you've all had a chance to read that document. So I guess I'll just leave it open to questions from you. Do you need me to say anything more about the recommendations, or?
I mean, if you want to hit any highlights for those who are a little behind on their homework.
I think our main recommendations is Senate should discuss the purpose of the FBAR. Is it self-reflective, or is it for evaluation purposes? We also think that Senate should differentiate between the FBARs and other evaluations. We got the sense that there's an over-evaluation. You know, you get the chair eval or the colleague eval, and you do the FBAR. Is there too much evaluation going on? And maybe we can consolidate some of these efforts. Senate should discuss whether feedback should be incorporated into the bylaws, because right now the bylaws don't say that feedback is mandatory. It just says that the chair will review the FBAR.
Says the chair will review and pass it on to the director, who will forward it to the provost office. That's it. There's no obligation for any feedback, period, in the bylaws right now. But there is, to piggyback on what Joan and Hannah worked on, there isn't, more faculty expect feedback on these FBARs, even though it's not obligated. So I think that's one of the recommendations, certainly.
Because if we go through all that work, we expect somebody to read it and give us some feedback. Senate should discuss whether to incorporate implications for poor or incomplete FBARs. Senate should discuss what role directors and/or administrators should have in the FBAR process. The bylaws indicate FBARs will be submitted to the directors to forward on to administration, but yeah, what Brian just said. Senate should discuss when FBARs are due to the chairs. The feedback from faculty is they prefer having them done required in June, which was kind of surprising. A big majority, or like 45% of faculty said June was the optimal time. Senate should discuss if new language is appropriate for bylaws, the bylaws regarding the sharing of FBARs. The departments that do share FBARs reported great value in that. It holds people accountable, and it also helps departments recognize and celebrate the achievements of faculty.
But 60.44% don't share.
Oh, one note on the timing, although the faculty members said that they like when it's due, there was some information from the directors that they don't like if the chairs don't get it back to them quick enough in the summer, they run out of summer time to review them, and then they have it piled into the fall. And so the timing of the review could also be slightly worded and solidified.
So I have one question for you all. So of these 7 recommendations, 6 of them begin, Senate should discuss. And I had the thought, which was that, oh wait, no, I said you all to go discuss this, so we don't.
So I'll speak to that, because that was a lot of my language. That was a lot of my language there. Personally, I didn't feel comfortable that there was 3 of us that would dictate to the entire faculty. We are unelected. We were appointed to a task force, and each one of us is elected. So if we were gonna change bylaws or make recommendations, we can maybe still go back. But, I mean, some of these issues, what is the purpose of the FPAR? I mean, there's 3 of us. I mean, and we've got faculty, and the range of responses vary based on how long we've been here. We did see that a lot of newer faculty here use it. And then once we found out, their responses, that it was, a good barometer to record activities and everything like that. I mean, this is large, and I personally, and maybe I convinced Joan and Anna that this is for the entire Senate. So I mean, I'm a senator, and I'd be glad to contribute to the discussion, but I personally didn't feel comfortable saying, here's what needs to change. I mean, the purpose of the FPAR, that's not for just the 3 of us to then dictate,
And many of those things are discussing changes of wording, right? Because it is so vaguely worded. If you look at that wording, it's like, and then they could provide feedback, right? Like, could share, like, it needs to be discussed if we want to say this is gonna happen, or we should just, I mean, I don't think it should be as fluffy as it currently sounds, because we are getting vastly different things across the campus. Very different things from faculty members, from chairs, and from directors of what the purpose is.
And, one thing we could say as Senate is, nope, bylaws are fine, and if that's the case, there's nothing in there that obligates anybody to make any further comment. So if the purpose is ultimately self-evaluation, then no feedback is required. I mean, that's ultimately the purpose. Problem kind of solved to a certain extent, and I know the directors have been giving feedback, but there's nothing in the bylaws that obligates feedback. And there's nothing that review, speaking of fluffy words, it says the chair should review. What does that mean? Look at it and move it through activity insight, or does that mean provide some sort of feedback? So, and that dovetailed with, we get quality evaluations every 5 years. Karen was here 2 years ago, maybe not everybody every 5 years, but there's annual evaluations every year where, a part of the annual evaluation is to look at the FPAR, I would imagine, and CV. So if newer faculty are getting an annual evaluation, maybe the FPAR serves as just a self-reflective device to, keep a record. And if that's the case, then maybe the bylaws just should say that it should be used as more of a self-reflective instead of, recording activities. But I mean, even the directors, there was a wide range of how directors used it. In some divisions, directors would find 2 faculty that had similar ideas and then put them together for working on a project. And in some, that was, we just looked at the activities and say, speak more to how this fits the bylaws. So there's nothing in it that says directors have to do any of that in the bylaws. So just to save directors work, maybe.
Look, Lori had her hand up.
No, that's okay.
Well, and the other thing is that if we were to decide that maybe it was evaluative, not just self-reflective, then there needs to be a decision about where some sort of repercussion comes in if it's not done well, and who would be responsible for that. Is it the chair who is actually coming back into the equal playing field? Is it the director who currently has no actual role in this? Or is it higher up where right now it's just being passed, but there's nothing that even is in the bylaws that something happens after it's passed on? So it's really discussion, because we found all this information and found out it's really vague.
And one other thing I want to say about the comments is that
if it's done right, it's an awesome tool. You know, if it is shared and if it's discussed and used for professional development, people really like it. But if it's treated as something that's not looked at, there are no consequences, then people don't care.
So to follow up on my question, first of all, I appreciate the work that you all put into this. And I also appreciate that you're being very sensitive to this being impacting all faculty. My concern is that what I see Senate does very well is discussing a proposal and saying, yes, we like that, or no, we don't. What I've seen us do less effectively is say, let's talk about a thing. And so I'm just concerned about you know, each of these topics. I think we should have this discussion. I'm not sure how we do it without saying, here's one proposed solution, should we do that or not?
So are you wanting us to come back to you with proposed bylaw changes?
Well, I'm not empowered to say that. I guess I'm curious.
Well, Senate discuss.
Yeah.
Discuss this.
I guess the question for the Senate is, do you all feel like we have what we need in order to move forward, or do we need a little more to give us a launching point?
Well, it sounds like we first have to decide the purpose, right? Because all these things, some of them will fall into place once we know what the actual purpose is.
That's why we put that one.
I'd say we have some guidelines here. We have all here have gone through the FPAR process, and we have insight into it. I know I had insight into it, and I have colleagues that shared this idea with it. And I'd say we were probably very well armed to talk about it.
Lori, did you have your hand up? You're gonna pass again?
Commit, Lori.
Sure. I will expose myself as, not remembering. Could someone remind me how they were born, the Fauquards and
That was my
Fauquets?
question too.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
How did they get into the bylaws in the first place?
How were they born?
Someone who's been here longer than me?
I don't know.
Ever since I've been here, we've been doing some kind of annual report on what we've done.
Right.
You used to do
Okay.
I don't know if it's
And we used to do two, a planning and a thing.
And
Okay.
we talk at our
Yeah,
program.
so these are just our annual reviews, just like everyone else in the world does. Okay,
We were
cool.
born at the beginning of time.
Fabulous, that's what I needed, thank you.
So Sue, was it before Jim Klein?
Oh,
Yeah.
Way
yeah.
before?
When I was a faculty member, I was doing them annually. We all did. We actually did them on,
Paper.
computers with paper.
Typewriters?
No, it was after typewriters, but it wasn't a fill-in kind of thing.
So do you think it was a faculty generated self-evaluation tool, or was it maybe a stopgap to administrative evaluation in some way? Like, how do you think?
I don't know, Dennis, I can't even speculate. I think, I can just say that it's, that each university that I know of has some tool of some sort to, and it may be that it's a repository for, I used to do a lot of referring to my FPAR when, frankly, after you build up a body of work, it's pretty darn hard to remember all that stuff. And if you're getting a carpenter grant, you can copy and paste things into, it's just a tool. But we would have interesting conversations in our program about what people were working on. It's how we collaborated on research projects at different times or co-presented at conferences. I know it's hard to believe that not all of us know what our colleagues are doing.
Jody?
I can't speak to the question, Dennis, about whether it was originally proposed as some sort of stopgap, is the word that you use, between administrative evaluation and self-reflection.
Yeah.
But the coexistence of a self-reflection along with evaluation from an external entity is pretty standard across most institutions. And we know that just from, they make products that allow us to do those
That's why we have
things,
AI.
because pretty much every university needs them.
Yeah.
But it's also, in terms of the the kind of research that supports it and why they're marketed to us is that there's different roles, really different functions and different outcomes for the self-evaluation versus the evaluative, entities, whatever those are. So it's not unusual nor necessarily problematic, and originally I suspect it was proposed because it makes a lot of sense, but.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was something that was generated by the Senate, because it's in the
It's in the bylaws.
As far as I know, it's always within the
or whether it
bylaws.
was sort of like a proactive step, because there was something happening from administration to do so.
I suspect not.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think you'd have to mine back into the bylaws, pre-computer.
Ooh, let's go to church.
I mean, I have FBAR's going clear back into the early 90s just by pulling up on my computer. There was once upon a time a Senate file folder that had ancient things, and there are in the provost's office and basement.
And
But
I'm not gonna go looking for them.
You gotta get back into the 80s I think, before you find them. So somebody would have to have the will to dig through a whole lot of paper.
You just think Brian did,
He was volunteering, right?
No. But as Melissa said before, a lot of it comes to the purpose. I assumed when I first came here, and this is, I don't know, my 11th year here, that a lot of it was, self-evaluation, kind of like a more detailed CV of what you've done in this given year. And then something happened where there was feedback that was expected and required, and regardless if we talked to the faculty through the survey and reading their qualitative reports, or when we interviewed directors, it seemed that the most benefit comes from newer faculty. So the first 5 years here, all parties, we're trying to support the new faculty, especially towards promotion and tenure. So if you're on the right path, or where are your weaknesses, or where can you build upon, the FPAR serves as just another tool to identify those. The annual evaluation should do the same thing from the chair as well, in using that. So one of the recommendations that we had was, and if I was the only person to vote on it, I know what I would say of what FPAR would be, but I'm not. But this is also piggybacking on the work of what Paul and the Faculty Rewards Task Force did, where one of the things was to ask the question is, are FPARs, should we just allow FPARs to be done every year for assistant professors and associate professors? I think the recommendation was possibly 2 years, and full professors maybe every 5 years. So I mean, there was a lot of task force coming, which kind of informed ultimately the ultimate question, and we could just solve it in discussion. What's the purpose of the FBAR? Regardless of the origin, I would think that the original intention is self-evaluation, but that would be me.
I just would also point out that I think this dovetails with the work of the post-tenure review folks who, in terms of the timing and when things drop off, I don't think that's coincidental.
No, I think they were started at the same time.
We needed your committee to finish before we could
Oh,
go
yeah.
Now they know.
But I mean, we put that as the first recommendation, because if we know the purpose, then everything else falls, the directors may not have to do it, so I mean, why am I calling on people?
Well, it seems to me that there are multiple purposes and that they evolve over time, because as a junior faculty, the main purpose for me at this point seems to be a good repository of everything I'm doing, and a check-in with my chair and my director, am I doing it right? And then over time, it seems to be a place where you have a voice in some sort of official capacity to say, look, here lieth my work, right? As time goes on, it becomes more about you being the primary voice in saying what it is that you do, rather than just student evaluations, rather than just chair evaluations or whatever happens after tenure. Because if you don't do anything else, then the only evaluations you have, the only picture of your work is external, right? So it comes from students evaluating you, it comes from your chair evaluation. So it gives a place to have your own voice in that later on in the process. But if people don't feel like that's useful or valuable and don't do it, then that...
They don't do it.
Right, exactly. So I feel like it's two purposes depending on where you are in your career arc.
Yeah, I think
So our group is still working on this report, I think I'll say, seeking further input. But we did notice this, but I'm talking, sorry, about the post-tenure, post-promotion group of which Janice and I are two of the people. And yeah, I would say that we're still working on what we're gonna say here, but it's key that if we don't have something like an FPAR for now, that group that I'm talking about, let's just say full professors and senior instructor twos, there's more, but let's just talk about those for a second. It feels like we, I guess the thing is, like you were saying, Jesse, when you get to that point in your career, maybe it's right that you have more of a say in what you're doing, but you also maybe also have an obligation to be clear to the world and including your colleagues and your chair and your director what it is you're doing. And you know, one end of the spectrum that we have to work on in our group is make recommendations about what we, setting minimum things and triggers even for personnel actions and so on. It just seems like a no-brainer that we ought to have, at least in every other year, FPAR and senior faculty, just as a touchstone between, and some feedback, by the way. I'm sure we're gonna ask for some feedback. Because otherwise, we don't wanna have a drift where the faculty member thinks they're doing great, and then a director comes in and says, what are you doing? You're not meeting, you know, there's gotta be some communication earlier on. We have to kind of self-police ourselves, I believe, is sort of the phrase we've been using. And that probably involves a meaningful FPAR, but I think, as others of you are saying, we're not gonna do an FPAR if it just seems to go into the void and doesn't get some feedback.
Well, as a junior faculty too, I totally can agree with Jesse on this. The mechanics behind the FPAR altogether, in the spirit of efficiency, like I remember going into that and thinking to myself, like, this is really rough shot, and just the different levels that it has to kind of go up the chain and back down. And I thought to myself, like, what's the difference between this and having like a different mode where we could just put on our accomplishments? I mean, that's literally what the FPAR is fishing for. So why is it so rough? Why did it feel so rough shot? So maybe one of the conversations we could have is like, is there a different system we could implement that would be a lot more user friendly?
Yeah.
Well, it's not very clear what happens to it after you do it as junior faculty.
Yeah.
Where does it go, and who's next,
Yeah.
and when it happens, and what button do I push?
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add in response to the faculty rewards group that was mentioned, the point about reducing the frequency of the FPARs. There was some feedback that came through the provost office and Patrick that I received that some faculty actually disagreed with that recommendation. So it seems there's a variety of opinions about this, even post-tenure, that not all faculty like that, because they like doing an FPAR each year, even people who are not pre-tenure.
Yeah. So I have two things. One is, I've done a lot of FPARs in my career. If I had them only every 2 or 5 years, I never would have gotten stuff on them. Just the exercise of having to gather the stuff once a year made sure I gathered the stuff. So I would hate to be somebody who was told every 3 years to fill one out. The second part is, an FPAR is a great way for you to point out the invisible work that you do. There are a lot of things that just don't show up in nice, obvious ways. And that FPAR is a way that I actually can learn about some of those things. And so I think that is actually an important piece to keep in mind. One of the comments that came out in their report was about math and CS's list of questions, because math actually started it. Jim Patton and I talked and started this to try to create a framework so that there were like specific questions to answer instead of just this, tell me everything about your teaching piece. And it has been helpful, I think, for the math folks. And so when I started and spent my little interim in CS, we developed the same thing for CS. It was particularly useful when we brought on new faculty, because it gave them an idea of what to address. And it also helped that both in math and CS, they were very much aligned to the departmental expectations and asked questions that were the types of questions people look at in those expectations when you're going up for promotion and tenure. And that was also particularly helpful for new faculty. But I think it helped in everybody just because you had questions to answer within each of the broader sections. And it helps in reading them to find those questions. So that might be a way to make it feel less cumbersome and all. I'm not exactly sure
No, you're
which
right.
pieces were driving the bridge.
Sherry, would you be able to share that with me, that I could put that in the drive along with the report? Because the report references those, and I was curious about seeing those.
I'll see if I can find them.
And I just want to add about 75% of all faculty said guidelines would be helpful, especially for new faculty. I had so many new faculty come to me and say, I don't even know what to write, what do I put here?
I mean, this is not gratuitous, but I want to point out that one of the reasons we did get down to a little finer grain, certainly in the math program, but not in some ways trying to align to the expectations we've put in the bylaws over the last 10 years, is by having things a little bit more specific, it makes it easier for the reports to be used, for example, by our director or our provost or our president. So we can go mine information that is, or have Patrick do it for them or whatever, rather than, you know, sort of the ubiquitous email of, hey, I need 5 examples of cool things faculty have done. Well, you know, of course our response is grumbling, well, read our FR. But it's easier to read them if they're a little bit more thoughtful. But I agree with you, Jeremy, they're kind of, the interface right now. Yeah, that's certainly true.
Just a reflection on it. I'm a junior faculty here, I'm on my 5th year, and when I was introduced to him, I was like, oh yeah, that's something you gotta do, you know, every year, no one ever really looks at them. That's what I was first told. And it's something I had to do. But I found the process reflective. I enjoyed it. I actually enjoy my FRs and sitting down there and looking back over all the things I've done and be able to put it somewhere. What's frustrating is that I've never actually sat down with anyone and pulled it up and looked at it, that someone, you know, is above me. And so then you start going through your promotion and tenure and looking at that, and you're like, you know, am I on the right track? I don't know. Hopefully, I'm filling out the questions, I'm doing the FPARs, and I feel like I'm doing pretty good. But, you know, when it comes down to it, I think someone should look at it above you, and that's never happened for me.
So, 2 things to that is you should, I imagine you should have had an annual evaluation. Somebody should be helping you, let's just put it that way. And why that hasn't happened, you know, that's different. But the FPAR thing, you know, I enjoy my FPAR. It is a tool for me. I should say I love, that's a strong word. But it is nice in June when you're wrapping down the academic year and you can look back and say, wow, you know, I accomplished a lot. Every day that I'm here and I'm like, holy cow, I got this meeting and this task force and Senate, and then I look back and say, wow, no wonder why I'm tired and I'm ready for a break. It feels good. But one of the things, the bylaws doesn't indicate that the chairs have to give any feedback. So, it would be beneficial if chairs provided some sort of written feedback, right? So then, at least one reason why we didn't do that, and maybe we would recommend this, but now we're asking the chairs to do more than they already are, right? And then if we ask the directors to provide feedback within the bylaws, I don't even know, you know, they would have to agree that this is a part of their thing. So, I mean, this is the conundrum that is the FPARs, hence why there was a task force, hence why we use squishy language for the recommendations, because there was such a wide range of variations for how, I mean, if I was just to go through, yes, it should be self-reflective, but there should be some feedback. It doesn't have to be, you know, extreme feedback, you know. You know, I don't know what role the directors would want based on, I interviewed 2 directors, I think Joan did 3 and Anna did 2, you know, it seems like directors go into it and read it, but, you know, there's a variation of when, you know, I'll throw Dan under the bus, sorry Dan, but, you know, I haven't got feedback from last year's FPAR, and I spent a lot of time on it when we were having this discussion, so, you know, a lot of these things are, if we can just get to what is the purpose of it, and I mean, I'm not volunteering Anna or Joan, but if we can hammer out what the purpose of it is, then everything else should fall into place pretty quickly, I think.
And maybe you wanna go back and talk to your departments about what they think the purpose is, even though we've sent out this survey and we did all this, maybe, you know, we just wanna have that general conversation. There's gonna be a lot of.
I'm shaking my head no, because I don't think going back to programs, because each program has their own
Right,
little
they all
culture, and
have
their own
this-
little culture is what's
Yeah.
really
It's true.
dividing,
I mean, it's true.
you know, things up, which makes it hard is when everyone's in, you know, these own little programs and they have their own culture towards it, whether it's good or bad, that influences their approach towards it. So, One reason, you know, if we had one giant distraction where Senate just says this is it,
This is the
then everyone has to.
Well, I wonder if letting each program have their own discussion and culture is not a bad thing. You know, 'cause I know some programs are larger than others, so putting that task, you know, it may take me half an hour to write one, but for a chair or division director to respond, you know, it depends on how many they have to respond to and what time they have. But I know in my experience with, when we had the physics program, I didn't get feedback, but I could see everybody's, and that was neat, you know, to be able to see and be inspired or just share. And, you know, being in different divisions, now I get feedback, but I don't necessarily see everyone's unless I'm doing a colleague review or something like that. And so it's different, but both ways have been just very eye-opening and interesting. And for me, it's always been a sort of like an archival tool where I can look things up, oh, when did I do that, you know? And so, and I like the self-reflection that, you know, I could do on my own, but I don't know if I would if I didn't have the deadline and expectation as regularly, so just a couple thoughts.
I guess I was just trying to interpret what I'm hearing from everybody, and it sounds like everybody likes feedback, right? Like I think that's an accurate representation of what most people have said. So is the issue then, like if Senate were to say, we would like feedback, is the issue then that that's more work on the chairs, that we need to find out from chairs, is that feasible? And then we also need to find out from division directors, is that feasible? Is that our, like, what's our next step?
Good question.
Well, I would think that for promotion, they'd be absolutely necessary, because if that's the track record of a faculty member, all the courses they've taught and all the different services and community connections they make, I think it's absolutely essential, because I've been on that committee, the promotion committee, and it's really hard to like just take everyone's narratives without some sort of backup data to that narrative, you know, and the FPAR is over, say, a 5-year period. You don't have to necessarily go back and read every single one, but at least if you have questions, you can go back and refer to, is this has some basis for a claim in your promotion packet. But in education, we allot an hour for every faculty member with the director and chair at that meeting for the faculty to just, it's kind of like a discussion, it's a positive discussion of.
And that's unique.
Yeah.
I mean, John's unique. I interviewed John. That's very unique. David Humphrey does something very unique. So even though we're discussing how this impacts individual faculty members, at the, you know, the director's level, there's different ways in which it's used. So if you're looking for consistency from everyone, that's, you know, because that's a great idea.
It's really helpful. I found both as a faculty member and as a chair during the winter quarter. It's really eye-opening for every single time, every single faculty member I sit in with. And it's congenial, you know, and so it also doesn't require a written response. So it's kind of like having a cocktail without the cocktail.
Well, and that is the thing, there's not equity across how
Or
they're
peers.
used, and that might be what we need to solidify, is that, you know, that's working great. Maybe we need to all try something like that, because if it's benefiting you, you know, maybe some other departments want that as well.
Well, we are close to our time here. Obviously, there's more to discuss. But I would encourage you all to, you know, regardless of the different cultures of the programs, we are a representative body. Please do take this report back to your programs and talk through it and see what kinds of recommendations your constituents might have for you to make here in Senate. And I will look for more time to discuss further.
Can I add, and this is, so I don't know what the procedure is if Senate changes requiring chairs to do more work or requiring directors to do more work, how that shakes out.
Well, ultimately, right, when we make recommendations for changes to the bylaws, those are recommendations to the president, and Sue weighs in on those as well. So I imagine if the division directors were in revolt, we would get some kind of feedback of saying, we can't approve this bylaw change, but here's, there's some discussion would start. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually heard division directors say that they would appreciate the ability to get feedback, but they don't know where it sort of makes a difference. If that was uniformly sort of determined and the language was changed to reflect that, I think they would take that responsibility quite seriously and be glad to do that. I don't think there'd be a revolt.
And for many instances, if we did change the language, maybe for more than half, we're really just updating the bylaws to reflect the current reality. But that wouldn't be universal across everyone, so.
Well, I've gotten feedback from both my chair and my division director in each of the years that I've been.
But not everybody.
But not everyone, right. But he was saying, for maybe there's half faculty, this is already right.
Right.
All right, well, thank you all again.
So is there anything more you need from us?
Not at this time, I would say.
Okay.
We don't have time for a motion about it.
Okay.
But I know where you live. So.
Wow.
But thank you all three of you for your service.
Yeah.
I'll send
Thank
you
you.
the
Was very
director's
good.
notes, just in case.
That'd be great.
Okay.
The very
All right, any announcements or new business?
Just got back from the Association for Outdoor Recreation Education and a combination conference with the Association for Experience Education. 1,200 people in the outdoor industry gathered in Spokane, Washington. We had 22 graduate students go there and get a really good idea of what the field's about and coming back and working on their thesis projects and say that. So, great conference.
Happy Thanksgiving.
This is.
Because I wanted to share